Traveling can be one of life's luxuries, and airplane travel does make it simple and easy. We can reach faraway continents to explore in a matter of days, but we should always be weary of the dark side. Join us as we have a look at some travelers who never came back. Harry Devert. Now, Harry Devert had a travel blog in which he had written about how he had the chance to see, touch, taste, smell, hear, and experience a plethora of the world's wonders. Harry lived by the motto that life is short and we need to make the most of it, and he certainly lived by what he said. Harry followed through with that belief with photos that range from standing in front of massive waterfalls in Brazil to being on top of the Himalayan mountains, and he never took for granted anything. But all of those adventures came with dangers of their own. The 32-year-old had written about having a gun shoved in his mouth and a tooth broken, as well as a number of close calls with gun violence during muggings that he'd experienced, all in his blog. Harry had been riding his green Kawasaki motorcycle through a cartel-infested region of Mexico when he suddenly vanished, leaving behind only an ominous WhatsApp message to his girlfriend in New York. Harry did live a life of adventure as a day trader, but all the money in the world couldn't fill his craving for danger, along with his adventurous spirit. That's when he decided to become a globetrotter, planning a one-year adventure on a motorcycle. An adventure that was supposed to culminate with him landing at the Olympics in Brazil. Harry lived a big and adventurous life, and his death is still a mystery to this day, although both the US and Mexican governments believe that he was murdered by a drug ringleader by the name of El Tigre, and his family and friends believe that the story is even bigger than that. Leanne Bearden. Leanne and her husband Josh Bearden had always been adventurous, and so it was nothing for the couple to decide to quit their jobs and then set out on a 2-year backpacking adventure. They left out with nothing but a carry-on backpack to take with them in some of the most rugged places that the world has to offer. Their blog, Go Explore 365, said that they had left in January of 2012 in order to travel across the United States. And then they'd visit Canada before venturing to Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America. The trip would include a few stops in New Zealand, China, Singapore, Egypt, Serbia, and Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro, just to name a few. The couple did finally make it back to the States, but Leanne was feeling the pressure of trying to adapt to normal life, feeling extremely anxious and stressed out in the process. So that's when they decided to stop for a visit in Georgia and Texas before going back to their home state of Colorado to see family. And that's when Leanne said she was going to go on a 1-hour walk. Something, however, wasn't right, and Leanne disappeared on her own accord. A few weeks would go by and she was still missing when a phone call by a man made a break in the case. A body had been found a few blocks from the in-laws' house, but the autopsy revealed hanging is what killed the beautiful, spirited woman, and that Leanne had sadly decided to take her own life. RIE Hunt. RIE Hunt was traveling with his friend when he suddenly vanished into thin air. The two had gotten into a heated argument at an airport about their next backpacking adventure to Bolivia, and RIE and his travel companion Mitchell Shepard decided to split up to cool off. The pair, the night before, had been believed to have consumed some sort of MDMA drugs before venturing out to the clubs of Brazil. One club owner had recognized the missing person in the photo as RIE Hunt and had asked his security guards for an escort back to the hostel. They had again decided to take some drugs before going to the airport, and that turned out to be a hallucinogen and a psychedelic. The pair had received what they believed to be MDMA from a pair of Australians that they met in Brazil, but it turned out to be something completely different. Hunt had taken more before the flight, and then ended up believing Shepard wanted to steal his passport and murder him. Before that, the two had been inseparable for 7 weeks of traveling together, with no arguments. But Hunt left the airport in a hurry and got into a taxi, even checking into an apartment where he would leave all of his belongings. After that, he just simply mysteriously vanished. Hunt's girlfriend, along with his uncle, had raised enough money from a Kickstarter campaign to find the Tasmanian electrician, but it would be 2 weeks before any sign would turn up. They then carried around photos of him, asking locals if they'd seen him, when a break in the case would occur, and a badly decomposed body would wash ashore. Hunt's girlfriend recognized the blue pants on the body as the last thing that he was wearing in a picture that he had sent, and dental records would later confirm he was a match. It's believed that Hunt had a psychotic episode where he then tried to swim 800 meters to an island, dying from either dehydration or drowning during drug use. Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart is one of the most famous female American aviators in history, setting flying records and continuously championing the advancement of women in aviation. Earhart would be the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the United States mainland, and then decided that the next best thing to do would be to fly over the Pacific. However, Earhart would become victim to tragedy in 1937. Earhart disappeared during an adventure, and the plane wreckage would never be found. Eventually, she would be officially declared lost at sea, and her disappearance still remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries. For a girl that was born in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, Amelia Earhart lived a full life of great adventure, defying traditional gender roles even at a young age. Then in World War I, she would go on to Toronto, Canada to serve as a Red Cross nurse's aide. It would be here in Canada where she would become fascinated by the pilots in the Royal Flying Corps and watch them train at an airfield nearby. When Amelia returned to the U.S., she enrolled as a pre-med student at Columbia, taking her first airplane ride in California with a famed World War I pilot by the name of Frank Hawks. The following year, in 1921, she began flying lessons with a female flight instructor by the name of Netta Snook. Then, after learning how to fly, she would purchase her first airplane, nicknamed the Canary, and she bought the bright yellow plane with money that she made as a filing clerk for the Los Angeles Telephone Company. It would be on June 1st of 1937, just 16 years after she'd received her certification, when she officially took off from Oakland, California to begin her flight around the world. This would be her second attempt to become the first pilot to circumnavigate the globe, and she would be accompanied by her navigator, Fred Noonan. The pair would reach New Guinea on June 29th, where they'd already covered 22,000 miles, with only 7,000 more miles to go before they would reach back in Oakland. This would be the last time that the pair would ever be seen alive again, because after that they lost contact with the U.S. Coast Guard and seemed to simply vanish into thin air. President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized a 2-week search for the pair, but they were never located, and there are still theories as to what actually happened to Amelia Earhart, even though the official government report declares them lost at sea. There's the crash and sink theory, which states that Earhart's plane simply ran out of fuel and she crashed into an open ocean. Retired federal agent Les Kinney had a theory of his own, having scoured through the National Archives for records to see if something had been overlooked. He would end up uncovering a photo stamped with an official Office of Naval Intelligence marking, which read Marshall Islands, Jalute Atoll, Jalute Island, Jalute Harbor. In the photo, there's a ship that's towing a barge that's hauling an airplane, and on the nearby dock are several people. Kinney argues that the photo would be taken before 1943 because the military conducted 30 bombing runs on Jalute between 43 and 44. He's also claimed there's 2 people in the photo who look exactly like Noonan and Earhart, and also further claims that the plane that's being towed looks like the plane that was flown by the pair. It would make the theory that she moved to New York and became a banker and changed her name a bit more believable. But no matter what theory you believe about Earhart, she did what she loved until the very end. Louis LaFrentz. The fact that Louis LaFrentz isn't known as the father of cinematography isn't the only mystery of the man's life. That's because he went missing in 1890, and interestingly enough, it would be Thomas Edison who would be credited for the first moving pictures, and not Louis LaFrentz, who truly deserved the honor. Louis LaFrentz should have dominated the headlines for his achievements in cinematography advancement, but instead it was the Lumiere brothers and Thomas Edison. LaFrentz's achievements were not as widely recognized because right before he was to have a public performance with his new technology, he mysteriously went missing with no clues as to where he may have vanished. His family could only speculate that he may have been homosexual and then committed suicide, or disappeared and changed his name as not to bring any kind of dishonor to the family name. What is known about LaFrentz is that he was a regular visitor to Jacques Daguerre, his father's friend and the photographic inventor, and it was here where he would become amazed by technology. LaFrentz studied chemistry and physics while attending university, and then specialized in tinting and firing photographic images. During the 1880s, he became fascinated by cinematic technologies being developed, and just 5 years later would create the 16-lens camera, applying for an American patent the same year. It would be at the beginning of 1888 when he received the British and American patents for the invention. His disappearance would mean that the world's first movie maker never got the chance to be a great achiever of his lifetime because it was never seen by the public. It would be in 1890 when he was going to demonstrate the single-lens camera in the United States, and it would be the first time that the short films and technology would be witnessed by the general public. LaFrentz hopped on a train in France to visit his brother and then boarded another train to Paris, but was never seen again. Sometime during that train ride, LaFrentz, along with his luggage, would go missing. It was January 1st in Malibu, California, when researchers from HRL Laboratories achieved a breakthrough in ceramic 3D printing technology, where they took 3D printing to a whole new level. And if you don't think that it's impressive, let me just tell you that ceramics are one of the hardest materials in the world.